listening to Hubspoke Tales, where we search for the truth and the lies of local folklore. Hattiesburg, Mississippi is our hub, and surrounding cities the spokes. If you also love the truth and enjoy the strange, join me on a verbal adventure through South Mississippi's most livable city. I'm Gina, and today we will discuss the Casket House and stories that have surrounded it since the 1970s. Every town has its secrets, uniqueness, history, and ghost. How do these stories become legend, and where do they come from? But most importantly, why do we listen with awe? Whether a longtime resident, a visitor, or just passing through, there is something interesting in every small town. In 1977, my cousins told me a scary story that stayed with me my whole life. A lot of people in Hattiesburg heard the same one as well. I saw the evidence for myself one night when my mom took me and my said cousins to see the original Star Wars movie at the Beverly Drive-In. They pointed at a large, white, two-story house off the southbound lane of Highway 49 next to Delia's Bonsai Nursery. It was shocking at first to be confronted with visual proof of the story that had been excitedly shared with me. I saw with my own 8-year-old eyes 2 small children's caskets located side by side on the roof of the house. According to legend, a brother and sister who lived in the house were playing near the highway and were killed by a speeding driver. Their parents were too distraught to bury them and received permission from the city to have them sealed in caskets and installed them in a safe and familiar place. Their little bright white rounded top caskets would be a warning for other drivers to do so safely so other children could be saved. The version of the story my cousins told me was that 2 children actually died fighting a fever brought on by the measles. They were twins. I am a twin. Less than 10 years old, I would spend every ride by that house for decades experiencing a sadness and curiosity that felt a little too close to home. The story felt so personal and too close. I was a twin and had several sets of twins in my family. I am 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day older than one set of twins I grew up with. I passed the story along in hushed tones when school friends would ride with me to the Beverly Drive-In, or on one particularly dangerous 13-year-old adventure when another teenage boy, shout out to Benji Stanley and his brother Burl, took me on an adventure. They picked us up at the Hub City skating rink where Benji gave me my first ever kiss on the lips and later rewarded me with a silver goat pin that for some weird nostalgic reason I still have at the age of 56. Also, to this day, whenever I hear Hall & Oates' I Can't Go For That saxophone solo, my heart skips a little beat. I could do several shows on the Hattiesburg roller rink and might just. Anyway, in the 1990s, I visited Delia's Plants and Bonsai Nursery to purchase a bonsai tree from the store next door to what we all now call the Casket House. I was uneasy, even in my 20s, to be on the property and still took jerky glances at the caskets when the nursery workers weren't looking straight at me. Several students from USM, or Southern Miss as they call themselves now, said that a professor perpetuated the story of the Casket House in his classes, and generations of students beyond those of us in the 70s passed the story on, and like all legends, it grew, changed, and slipped into the decades like the rest of us, older and changed. By then, the additional detail of the story, my favorite, was that the ghost children could be seen some nights watching the movies that the drive-in showed, but that legend had all but been forgotten. Hattiesburg is considered the hub city due to its location between New Orleans, Jackson, Mobile, Gulfport, and Meridian. Highways 49 and 59 converge here, and hundreds of thousands of travelers venture here or pass through yearly. With a past that includes impactful civil rights history, the roots of rock and roll, the largest U.S. National Guard training base east of the Mississippi River, and several hospitals and universities, the hub city is the perfect place to explore local folklore and urban legends. But all small-town folklore had a seed of truth that branches into an oftentimes disregarded legitimacy. Owned by Tom Delia, one of the partially retired owners of the still open nursery, The house still looks as it did when it was built. The children's caskets, white with rounded lids, are actually skylights installed to allow for natural light to flow into the first level of the house. Energy efficient and aesthetically pleasing, that particular style is considered domed and, due to its shape, resembles small white coffins, unless viewed from the top down, where anyone would see that they're actually skylights. This view was never and would never be available to the shocked children and even more shocked adults viewing it from the ground level or speeding by at 65 miles an hour. Skylights, people. I found out they're skylights. Reddit readers Alex A., Jessica Raymer, and Pretty OK were complimentary of the nursery attached to the Casket house and the owners of the house, saying, "This quirky local legend is not true at all. The owner, Tom, is especially knowledgeable and kind. The bonsai trees are exquisite, and there is a unique vibe to the shop." As an adult, learning all the details of the truth now, I'm jolted by the simplicity of the truth. Of course, those are skylights. Of course, they are skylights. Of course, parents don't have their dead children buried on top of their houses, at least not these parents. In the world we live in now, a simple search for this house or the unbelievable story would have answered the question. But I believed. I believed for a long time, and lots of people believed it and other stories like it as well. So I'm back to the question of, where do legends come from and why do we listen, believe, and perpetuate the weird and so often obviously false narratives? It's not like Mississippi or even the South has the monopoly on horror stories or cryptids. West Virginia has the Mothman. Alabama has the White Thing, an albino Bigfoot. And Iowa has the Van Meter monster. New Orleans alone has hundreds of haunted house stories, and there are volumes of books about the strangeness of the Appalachians. Most folklore is passed down from one another as superstition and myth, and like all oral tradition, details are often changed deliberately or just by accident. If you ever played the telephone game in school where you were given a 2 to 3 sentence story to pass in whispers to the person behind you, and on until the last person who hears the story must repeat it, the story is either so watered down or so changed and added to that it does not resemble the most accurate version of the truth. But every player after the first only has the so-called truth that is passed on to them. They must believe or not what information they have on hand. In the case of the Casket house, I feel confident that someone made an observation about the skylights and perhaps said aloud to someone else, "Those skylights resemble caskets." Someone then probably heard that and thought, "Those caskets look too small for adults." And bam! The story has been slapped on its bottom and is alive and kicking. Generally, these small-town legends are harmless and offer a unique charm to the towns from which they grow. They are everywhere and will never leave us, although researching them has become a heck of a lot easier with technology in our hands. I think that in our hearts, we need to also remember that with every story, there are real people involved and towns that can be affected negatively if we, the listeners of those tales, don't control our own behavior. For me, finding out in my 50s that a story I believed and spread to others for decades was not true was actually a positive experience. It reminded me of how much I love the strange and the unique and love doing research. I laughed at myself for my own ignorance, and it was a nicely humbling experience for someone who has 2 master's degrees and sometimes thinks I'm smarter than I am. Also, it validates my loyalty to Hattiesburg, a town that I love. Now that I've told you the truth and the lies of what I will never call the Casket House again, let me tell you this. If you're ever looking for a bonsai, you'll never find anyone who knows more about them than the Delias. Don't just stop by, though, because they're partially retired. You need to call to make an appointment. They do visit the nursery, but it's not on a set schedule. So if you're in Hattiesburg, make sure to stop by. I'll also tell you that there's a wonderful place here called the Camper Park Zoo. The truth about the Camper Park Zoo, which is now called the Hattiesburg Zoo, is that it's located on approximately 40 acres off a Hardy Street, and it boasts more than 1,000 species of animals. I especially like seeing the 3 giraffes on my way to work every morning. They also have a sloth experience that's incredible. So, if you're ever traveling on Highway 49 south of the Hub City, stop by Delia's and get a beautiful bonsai tree. And I hope you laugh a little at my naivete and the fact that superstition and weirdness abound in general and everywhere. I hope you enjoyed Hub Spoke Tales with Gina and will join me next time when we explore the truth and the lie of Hattiesburg's famed cat lady.